Chris Ambrosio.
AJ Soto.
Elise Broche.
David Cogle, President Lodge 17.
Steve Amos, FOP.
Keith Brown, FOP 17 Labor.
All right. So we have we're down to the 5 proposals that we discussed last week. I brought copies of those proposals. Essentially, our proposals at this point have not changed, but we did want to make a couple of corrections that we talked about last time, or additions that we talked about last time. So if we can talk real quick about those, and I'll hand out what we've got. In Appendix D, position classification and pay plan, on Section H, emergency management pay, we struck some provisions of this agreement may be suspended and,
Yes.
like we talked about.
Oh, and?
Yep.
Pardon me?
And, I forgot and.
The word and.
Okay.
So I have a copy of that with that language struck. On Article 29, retirement, in our proposal, 29.1, the second sentence regarding just states that this is a summary of the prior current provisions that are already in the plan. We added some language to that just to be clear that should there be any conflict or interpretation issue that the plan will control. So the new language says provisions of the prior collective bargaining agreement that have been included in the plan are summarized as follows in 29.2 through 29.10 below. In the event of any inconsistency between the provisions of 29.2 through 29.10 below and the plan will control.
So basically the plan is the driving force.
The plan is in our code, it's codified, it is our law on this pension plan. So we just want to be clear that we're only summarizing what's already in the code here. We're not providing anything different than what the plan already provides.
And the plan's still the November 19 one that the council approved, that was after the Sugarman rewrite, is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes. Okay, so the only other thing before we get started that you all asked us to consider and follow up on was making some delineation between mandatory overtime and voluntary overtime for the purposes of sick leave pay. We did give it some thought. I talked with the city manager about it, and we feel strongly that we do not want to draw any line between mandatory versus voluntary overtime pay for the purposes of compensation.
Okay.
Okay. So with that, we'll go ahead and hand this out. I have pension in a separate paper clip. The other ones are all put together.
Everything, the only thing you want to change would be
So is Article 11 just a one-pager?
It is.
yeah, it's still the same. Yeah, we knew that.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with 11.
Okay.
I mean, it's just, I mean, obviously we've been beating this dead horse for about 3 years now with the and sick time. You know, we still assert that the city's kind of forcing employees to choose between earned overtime or taking sick. But, you know, the expediency of getting this done, I think we're willing to TA off on 11. It's just the and sick leave provision, include the MOU.
And that new wording.
Yeah,
In the MOU.
if we want to do 11.
Don't be surprised if it doesn't come up again in the future.
That would not surprise me.
Okay. Cause it's come up almost 3 straight CBAs, so.
Understood. So we can go ahead and TA that?
Yes, ma'am. Appendix D and Article 30 are obviously, the only real hang-up on those is the duration of the agreement. So I think we'll set those aside pending further discussion about Appendix C and and Article 29, the pension.
Okay.
Just so we're clear, in D on H, we all agreed we're gonna strike that portion that says some provisions of this agreement may be suspended, right?
I think the revised one we got, it's yellowed. That
Yes,
language
I
is.
highlighted.
Yeah, we don't, everything else in D, except for the last sentence, which
Okay.
is repeated in Article 30. But that's, you know, we don't have any other issues with Article D in terms of the pay, the emergency pay, the activation pay, the incentive pay, and then the FTO coordinator pay.
Okay.
So that one, for the most part, we're ready.
It's on the burner.
Yeah. Let's go with the pension, Article 29 now.
Okay.
We have, the other copies.
I'll put them right here.
This is just kind of one section. We're gonna repropose COLA language on the pension, and I'll let Keith explain most of that.
Alright, we're gonna take one more run at this. We've made an adjustment with regard to this proposal as well. Just a quick recap, we spent over $6,000 in labor funds this past year doing actuarial studies, getting ready for this negotiating session. You know, for y'all to hit us the first day that you're looking for a 1-year proposal, which is now turned into a 2-year proposal, which is fine.
I don't believe we suggested a 1-year proposal once. This is in day one, we were talking about a 2-year proposal.
Well, we'll go back and look at the tape. I might be wrong, but I thought I heard 1 year, alright? So anyway. One of the things that we have been trying to put into place is some type of cost of living adjustment for our members once they retire. We took a very conservative approach. We didn't go for the long haul COLA, which we know is very detrimental to pension plans. We also looked at a way to do it so it's not financially encumbered on the city. And that's why the membership agreed to increase their contribution rate by 2%. That would have left a $67,000 deficit to finish funding it out for that year. We had planned on using some of our chapter money for that, okay? I don't remember, Karen, if you were in the room or not in the room back in 2010 when the city tried to take our pay plan from us, the old step plan that we had. And Eric Holzhauser looked at me and said, well, you can't guarantee that the step plan's gonna carry over because that contract's over. Okay? And that's when we fought hard to keep the language of the pay plan in the contract, right? So in a hopes to continue with that pay plan. To no avail, because we went to impasse in 2011, and the city took the pay plan from us anyway and froze our wages, all right? My point here is this: the city is routinely looking at that 185 money as their, an additional funding source to offset y'all's cost to the pension. Automatically, you're assuming that and if you weren't, you wouldn't be including it in your budget. And the contract hasn't even been negotiated yet. That doesn't seem fair. I don't work on y'all's side of the table, all right?
It's our current agreement, and so naturally we would budget for that, yes.
Okay, all right, well, I remember Eric's words ringing in my ear that the current agreement expired, all right? And this past current agreement expired on 1 October. The current agreement. So if you're budgeting money that's not already been negotiated, that doesn't seem right to me, all right? We were trying to be independent with this, and again, not burden the city. We can fund it, right? And it was our intent to continue funding it with that chapter money, because that's part of what it's for. Are you entitled to some of that money under law? Yes. Okay? Can you get that money if we go to impasse? Yes. But that's bad for everybody. That's bad for everybody. So, here's our last approach. We are still willing to increase our contribution rate by 2%. We're gonna need $67,000 to fund it. You can have a.
In addition to the 2%,
In
which
it-
cost the city 67,000.
Well, either you let us keep $67,000 in the chapter money, which I still understand to you is a deficit, because that's $67,000.
It is, I mean, regardless of which bucket you put it in, it would still cost the city an additional $67,000.
That's because you've already budgeted the money. Had you not budgeted the money.
No, it would cost us $67,000 more than we are currently paying in contributions. There would be an increase in our contributions, whether it comes out of chapter money or anywhere else, it would increase the amount that we would have to pay into the fund.
And the last caveat, the adjustment that we've made on that is you have to have at least 20 years of service to qualify for the COLA. So if somebody leaves at 10 years and they bank their money to draw on it later, they're not gonna be eligible for the COLA. They work 15 and they leave, they're not gonna be eligible for the COLA. They have to work at least 20 years credited service or more to be eligible for the COLA. Okay? What was the number, David, on how many people would qualify for that have retired recently?
So in the past 8 years, there would have been 4 that would have qualified for the COLA benefit that had more than 20. Yes, we've had several people separate, but they have not reached their 20 years. That 67 that we keep, going back on, did not include that 20-year provision. That was a movement that we made to lessen.
Since then.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And have you had any update to the actuarial numbers?
We
Have you
haven't,
done that to
we
actually
haven't,
recalculate?
unfortunately, like Keith said, we spent a lot of money doing the actuarial numbers, to no avail, and we get it, there's always gonna be a cost of doing business, but, one of the things that I asked you guys to consider about the COLA is, number one, over the past 8 years, there have only been 4 people that would have qualified for that benefit. In addition to that, the next 10 years, anybody that may qualify for it is going to be at a reduced rate. You can see the last discussion that we had, that copy that I gave you guys, everything in yellow is just pertaining to the COLA. In other words, all the other language that you guys inserted that was normally redlined is now just normal, if you will, in that copy. But there is a reduced benefit. So AJ, we discussed that. Essentially the calculation is future time plus 10 divided by total time is gonna give you some ratio less than 1. Multiply that by the 2%, and that is going to be the adjusted COLA for somebody that hasn't paid into the fund. In other words, the fund hasn't totally received the benefit of a lifetime of the increased contributions.
So, if they have less than 20 years of service, they would still be eligible for a COLA, it just wouldn't be at 2%.
No, ma'am. Less than 20 is no.
No
I'm
COLA
talking
at all.
about people that have more than 10 years
Uh-huh.
currently.
So if you use me as an example, I'm at just over 20 years. I hit my 20-year mark in May. But I plan on retiring probably within the next 5 to 7 years. I'm going to have an adjusted COLA.
He's going to have a lessened COLA.
It won't be 2% a year.
Because the fund hasn't, part of the funding stream for the benefit was the increased employee contribution.
Where I'm only gonna be paying out, or paying into it for 5 or 7 years, I need to have an adjustment.
Without him paying a lifetime of that 9.95%, he will see a lessened benefit. That is another.
So, I'm just wanna make sure I understand.
Mhm.
So the driver would be the effective date of this change. If I,
We put October 1st because that's been the effective
Sure.
date of.
so if it's effective October 1
Yes, ma'am.
of 2020, are you saying that the years of service since the effective date, since October 1 of 2020, would all count toward the 2% COLA?
In addition to an increased employee contribution.
In addition to an increase in
Yes,
employee
ma'am.
contribution, but for eligibility for the COLA,
Yes, ma'am.
you're counting all the years of service beginning October 1, 2020, and some portion of prior years of service,
10.
10?
That's for the
So-
figuring out the final COLA.
So if someone were to retire on October 2, 2020, the most they could have for years of service would be 10.
No, ma'am.
Okay, I'm
So
I'm trying to
basically-
understand how this would work.
Okay, actually, yes. If they had, let's say they hit their 20th year on October 2nd, 2020,
Uh-huh.
and they retire.
Uh-huh.
So that, using the calculation of future time, would be 0 plus 10 divided by total time. Let's say they had 20 years, that would be a ratio called 0.5 for simple math. Multiply that by the 2%, they would receive a 1% COLA.
For a 10-year period.
For a 10-year period.
For a 10-year period,
Or
and then,
closing the COLA
so,
for a 10-year window.
our thought process behind the COLA is this is a gap between the employee's retirement at age 55 and the collection of Social Security, that sort of 10-year period.
Even if that 20-year employee hadn't made any of the additional contributions, they'd be eligible for that multiplier.
They would be eligible for the 10 years. And that's something we can talk about if you guys think, we. Bob?
Did he provide you with what the cost was, total cost was for the increase in benefit? In other words, we know what the city's cost would be after your 2% increase in employee contributions. Did he give you a total cost number, assuming you did not increase your employee contributions? What I'm trying to do is capture what's the actuarial
No, because
cost
we
of the COLA.
wanted, when we ran the numbers, our goal was to come as close to 0 as we could,
I see.
funding the benefit ourselves. We
Okay.
don't wanna drive a pension fund into unsustainability. That's not our goal with this.
Mhm.
That's why we went with the increased employee contribution to offset the benefit of the COLA.
Okay, that's something we'll have to.
And if you look back
talk
at
about.
the GRS, Brad may have, on the documents I
He
sent you.
may have given us a total cost and, given you a total cost and then reduced it by the 2% increase in employee contribution.
Yes, ma'am, cause I'm looking at it, he's got a whole bunch of columns on his scenarios. Now, obviously, the end one for him was, city's contribution,
Sure,
cause that's really what we were trying to boil it down to.
okay,
But when we looked at it, obviously, the city is gonna benefit from that additional 2% contribution for an extended period. There's not gonna be an employee that retires within the next 10 years that is going to draw a full 2% COLA. So every single person for the next 10 years is going to have a reduced benefit. However, the fund will benefit from that 2% increase in the employee contribution. Not to mention the unfortunately high turnover we have among our department will do nothing but benefit the fund.
Okay, so someone who, I mean, you have to have 25 years and 52 or 55 with 10 years just to be retirement eligible, right? So
Yes,
someone
ma'am.
with 10 years and 55 years of age would not be eligible for this
Would
COLA
not be
ever.
eligible. Nope, and that's one of the changes we made from our initial proposal, again, to bring, now, we have not rerun the numbers.
Mhm.
To be honest with you, there were so many moving variables, in the package. If you want us to try and look at it, dialing it down, the problem is just the turnaround time
Right,
with
sure.
GRS,
Yeah,
is
I
I don't
understand.
think,
And one of the motivators here is, you get that employee that comes and only works here for 10 years and retires at age 55.
Mhm.
They're probably drawing another retirement
Right.
from somewhere,
Mhm.
where you get the long-term employee that's been here, that this is probably gonna be their only retirement.
Mhm.
Because they started here when they were in their early to mid-20s, maybe even their early 30s, and worked through age 55, age 60, right? They're gonna need some kind of cost adjustment until they start drawing Social Security.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's the big movement as far as the 20-year employee. Those are gonna be your long-term folks that have been here, and this is their only retirement.
Okay, that's something we're gonna have to, we'll have to talk about, we can caucus when we're.
yeah, I think once we
done
kinda get through
and we can
everything.
talk about it.
The other thing, will be Appendix C, the pay schedule. It's a hard sell for a status quo on the second year to the membership, especially when the city asked for the chapter money that second year. So our counter is a 2-year contract, 2% the first year, 2% the second year. And I have that schedule if you guys would like to see it. Now, of course, I
That's
didn't,
okay, I mean,
I was gonna say you guys dialed it down to like the 10,000th of a percent. I'm never gonna match your numbers exactly, but I'll come close.
Okay, all right, so 2% and 2%, and then continuation of the merit plan, and then on pension, you are proposing for 20-year, and employees retiring in 20 years on the COLA. And it looks like is the backdrop still on the table?
So we did ask for an increase in that. We have lowered it from our initial. Our initial was 6, we have gone down to 5. That, even GRS is at 6%, was 17,000. That's just, I mean, the city's making, the pension fund is making, the actual actuarial rate of return, is around 7.5%. So the fund is making 7.5% on the employee's money for that time that they're in the backdrop.
That's the assumed rate of return, that's not necessarily the actual rate of return.
The actual 7.95 when gone, when they take it out to 30 years, or somewhere right around there, at least the last
No,
report.
I mean what we actually earn, we don't know that until it happens, what we're actually earning during the year. That has to be recalculated every year.
No, I understand that, but we've exceeded our actuarial rate of return every year that I've been a trustee on the board. So, even, 7, that's, again, we came off of our 6, but the fact is the fund is making, a lot more than we're giving back to the employee on the backdrop. So that's why we've asked for that movement there.
Okay.
And again,
You understand that the 3% is consistent with the amount of interest, is it 3 or 3.5 that we pay on employee contributions? When we refund those employee contributions, we pay interest obviously on that as well.
and I understand that.
I think it's consistent rate of interest throughout the provision.
When you say you would refund employee contributions.
If someone resigns and elects not, either they're not vested or they're vested and they elect not to defer and stay in the
I
program.
have no
Yeah.
idea.
We
I thought
refund
you
their
just gave them back whatever they
contribution.
paid in.
No, they get.
Yeah, they get a contribution refund with interest for all of the contributions that they've made into the fund.
But again, a backdrop is that incentivization for that employee to take that lessened benefit amount, basically to lower what the pension pays out monthly. So obviously that's something that benefits the pension fund.
It does, there may be a slight benefit to it, but also there's a big lump sum payout involved in that, especially if they backdrop for 3 years.
Again, there can be. I know that I think Again, in the past 8, I think we've only done 2 on the police side. And yes, they were a sizable chunk of the pensions budget for that year. But again, it's, you know, we're asking for that increase
Are
amount,
both
which
of those 30-year employees?
One was,
30
one
and
wasn't.
25-ish.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't, I mean, we'll talk about it, but I don't think that we would like to have an interest rate on backdrop that is disproportionate with our other interest rates in the plan.
Well, I understand, but we just want it to be closer to what the rate of return is.
Well, we don't know what the rate of return is year after year after year until it happens. You know, when you enter into an economic turndown, we could actually be losing money on our pension assets. It happened. It happened from 2008 all the way to probably 2011.
Yeah, there was.
We're losing money.
Mhm.
So you can't, it's not a guaranteed rate of return.
No, I
So
understand.
we have to ride the wave with,
Sure.
with good economic times and bad times. You know, yes, in recent years, we may have earned more than the actuarial assumed rate of return, but there's no guarantee that's always gonna be that way.
And can we add a trigger?
What
Where
would
if
the
the-
trigger be?
Maybe if the pension doesn't reach its actuarial rate of return, it drops to 3%, but if it does reach it, then it's 5%.
I hesitate
that protects the city,
to add
that
those kinds of
protects-
things. They are administratively very difficult, very cumbersome to write into the plan. But, you know, like you said the other day, we're not gonna be here forever, and for the pension administrator down the road to have to try and make those calculations and keep track of all of those records, it becomes very, very difficult.
Don't say we're not trying to be creative, just keep.
You are, I mean,
Yeah,
you.
I mean, trust me, I
Definitely
understand.
get points for that.
You know, I understand your concern to make sure that the pension fund, that we're not paying out a huge backdrop in years when the pension fund may be, you know, shrinking.
Right.
But at the same time, you know, for the years that the pension fund makes double-digit returns and we're still paying the employees backdrop
Well,
of 3%.
keep in mind too, the city contribution is a direct reflection of the pension, of the asset, interest that we're earning on the assets, among other things.
Mhm.
But as the interest, actual earned interest goes down, the city has to make up that difference in our contributions. And so right now, we're still increasing our contributions year after year after year after year, and those are in good years, we're seeing some good higher interest rates. So as that changes, we have to make up that difference out of the general fund, so.
Yeah, I mean, according to all the reports, I mean, it's gone from about 24 to just about 27% of the required payment into the fund, at least for the police officers. I can't speak to the firefighters or the general. And yes, the city's has, you know, increased from right around 11 to 14-ish. So, again, we know, but at the same time, the employees, the member portion, although the percentage has stayed fixed, has also increased its contribution.
Well, dollar amounts, certainly,
Correct.
that changes with increases in payroll. Okay, is there anything else before we take the caucus and
I think that's pretty
you guys
much it. I mean,
have some time to,
And the COLA.
what's that?
So backdrop 2.2 and the COLA, and
Appendix D is just part and parcel with that 2-year contract.
Yeah, so. Okay,
You guys want us to step up? Probably be easier if we left.
we might need to run upstairs if, I don't know how hard it is for us to pack our stuff up.
You borrow my calculator from me, it's not much, but.
I think we'll step out, so you
Okay.
guys can feel free to stay.